Coffee shop ambiance filled the air with familiar sounds of ceramic mugs clinking and steam hissing from the espresso machine. Victoria Hartwell fumbled with her phone and oversized purse, her tired eyes struggling to focus on the menu board she had memorized months ago. "Careful with that latte, honey. You look like you're about to fall asleep standing up," said the barista, her voice filled with genuine concern. Victoria managed a weak smile. "Sorry, I have been up all night with the baby." Again. At 42, Victoria should have felt grateful for her life. She lived in a stunning Upper East Side apartment, married to Richard Hartwell, a millionaire ex-husband-to-be, though she did not know it yet. Her 2-year-old daughter Emma bounced restlessly in her stroller, while Victoria's 6-month pregnant belly made every simple task feel monumental. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, leaned forward conspiratorially. "First baby, second," Victoria replied, one hand instinctively moving to her rounded stomach. "You would think I would have figured this out by now. Every baby is different. My sister said her second was way harder than her first." Victoria nodded gratefully. These small moments of connection with strangers had become lifelines in her increasingly isolated world. Her husband Richard worked 16-hour days building his investment firm, and her best friend Sarah was the only person who seemed to understand the challenges of managing a household while heavily pregnant. The coffee shop door chimed, and Victoria glanced up hopefully, wondering if Richard might surprise her with an unexpected appearance. Instead, a businessman in an expensive suit rushed past without acknowledgement. Story of her life. Her phone buzzed insistently. Richard's name appeared on the screen. "Hello," she answered, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder while bouncing Emma's stroller with one hand. "Listen, Victoria, where are you? Emma has been screaming for an hour." Victoria blinked in confusion. "I am at the coffee shop. You know, my Tuesday morning routine, Emma is right here with me." "What? No, she is not. She is here at home, and she wants her mother." The fog of exhaustion cleared momentarily. "Richard, Emma is with me. Are you feeling okay?" A pause, then Richard's voice, sharper now. "Right. Sorry. I am not thinking straight. These deals are killing me. When will you be home tonight? Listen, Victoria, I am stuck in meetings all day. Ask Sarah to help with Emma. She is already doing so much for us. I cannot keep imposing. I have to go. Love you." The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, wondering when her 20-year marriage had become a series of rushed conversations and missed connections. She remembered their dating years, when Richard would call just to hear her voice, when he would surprise her with flowers for no reason other than it was Tuesday. "Large oat milk latte for Victoria," called the barista. "Thank you." Victoria tucked her phone away and lifted the warm cup gratefully. The first sip tasted like liquid salvation. Emma began to fuss, her little hands reaching for the coffee cup. "No, sweetheart. Hot. Mama's coffee is hot." "Da, Emma asked hopefully. "Daddy is working. Baby girl. Always working." Victoria settled into her favorite corner table, the one with a view of the street where she could watch normal people living normal lives. A young couple walked by, hands intertwined, laughing at some private joke. Had she and Richard ever looked that happy? She honestly could not remember anymore. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. "Oh my God, Vic, how are you feeling today?" Victoria smiled despite her exhaustion. Sarah Chen had been her closest friend since college, the sister she never had. "Tired." Richard seemed confused this morning. He thought Emma was at home crying when she is obviously here with me. "Poor guy is working so hard. Honestly, I do not know how millionaire husbands manage the pressure. Richard is providing such an amazing life for you and the kids." "I know. I just wish we could spend more time together." Real time, not just him falling asleep on the couch after 18-hour workdays. "Oh my God, sweetie. That is just how successful men operate. My dad was the same way when I was growing up. The sacrifice is worth it for the financial independence you will have." Victoria stirred her latte thoughtfully. Sarah always knew exactly what to say to put things in perspective. You are probably right. I am just hormonal and tired. Do you want me to come over? I can take Emma to the park while you nap. Would you really? I feel terrible asking. Are you kidding? I love spending time with Emma. Besides, what else are best friends for? After hanging up, Victoria felt the familiar warmth that came from Sarah's unwavering support. In a world where her husband was increasingly absent and her social circle had shrunk to accommodate Richard's demanding schedule, Sarah remained constant, always available, always understanding, always willing to help with whatever Victoria needed. Emma had fallen asleep in her stroller, her cherubic face peaceful in the filtered coffee shop light. Victoria watched her daughter and tried to imagine what life would look like when the new baby arrived. Would Richard be more present than would the demands of two children force him to prioritize family over work? Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Dinner tonight. Surprise. Victoria's heart jumped with unexpected hope. A dinner out. Just the two of them. Like the old days. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe this was just a phase. A temporary imbalance that would correct itself once Richard's current business deals closed. She finished her latte and gathered her things, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Tonight would be different. Tonight, they would reconnect. 20 minutes later, Victoria's doorbell rang. Oh my God, Vic, you look exhausted. Give me that baby right now, Sarah Chen announced, sweeping into the apartment with the energy of someone who had actually slept the night before. Sarah, at 38, maintained the polished appearance of a successful marketing agency owner. Her black hair fell in perfect waves, her makeup was flawless despite the early hour, and her designer clothes somehow never showed wrinkles or coffee stains. She made motherhood look effortless, probably because she had chosen to focus on her career instead. Sarah, honestly, I do not know what I would do without you. Victoria sank gratefully onto her living room sofa, while Sarah expertly lifted Emma from her stroller. That is what friends are for, sweetie. Besides, Richard works so hard providing for this beautiful family. The least I can do is help support you through this pregnancy. Victoria watched Sarah bounce Emma with natural skill. Sometimes I wonder if he even notices I exist anymore. This morning he thought Emma was at home crying when she was obviously with me at the coffee shop. Oh my God, do not say that. Richard adores you. Remember your anniversary dinner last month? He spent a fortune on that restaurant. And the jewelry he gave you for your birthday? Most women would kill for a millionaire ex-husband. I mean, husband who spoils them like that. It is not about the money, Sarah. I just want to feel connected to him again. Like we are partners, not just roommates sharing expenses. Sarah sat down beside Victoria, Emma contentedly playing with Sarah's bracelet. Vic, listen to me. Marriage changes after children. It has to. Richard is under enormous pressure to maintain your lifestyle. The narcissistic abuse he must endure from difficult clients, the long hours, the constant stress he is doing it all for you and the kids. Narcissistic abuse. You know, demanding clients who think they own him just because they invest millions with his firm. Richard has told me some horror stories about the way these people treat him. Victoria felt a familiar stab of guilt. She had been so focused on her own loneliness that she had not considered the emotional toll Richard's work might be taking on him. He talks to you about his clients only when he needs someone to vent to. You know how men are. They do not want to burden their pregnant wives with work stress. He calls me sometimes when he has had a particularly brutal day. This was news to Victoria. He calls you just to decompress. I think it helps him to talk to someone outside the situation, someone who understands the business world. Sarah shifted Emma to her other hip. Oh my God, I hope that does not make you uncomfortable. It is completely innocent. Obviously. No, of course not. I am glad he has someone to talk to. Victoria tried to ignore the small knot forming in her stomach. I just wish he would talk to me too. He probably does not want to stress you out during the pregnancy. Men think they are protecting us by handling everything alone. It is actually kind of sweet when you think about it. Emma had fallen asleep against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah moved with practiced quiet, settling the toddler into her pack and play without waking her. You are so good with her, Victoria observed. I love kids. Always have. Just never met the right guy to have them with. You know, but watching you and Richard build this family, it gives me hope that true love still exists. Victoria felt some of her anxiety ease. Sarah was right, as usual. Richard was providing an incredible life for their family. His distance was temporary, a sacrifice he made to ensure their financial independence. She should be grateful, not resentful. Speaking of Richard, Sarah continued, he mentioned you two are having dinner tonight. How romantic. You talked to him today. He called this morning to see if I could babysit Emma. I told him I would be delighted. You deserve a night out, especially this close to your due date. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. 7 p.m. Wear the blue dress. Love you. Sarah glanced at the message and smiled. See, he is thinking about every detail. That blue dress looks amazing on you. By the way, really shows off your pregnancy glow. I feel like a whale in everything. Oh my God, stop. You are gorgeous. Richard is so lucky. Sarah gathered her purse and keys. I should let you rest before tonight. What time should I be here for Emma? 6:30. Perfect. And Vic, try to focus on how much Richard loves you tonight. Okay, sometimes we women get so caught up in what we think we need that we miss all the ways our men are already showing us love. After Sarah left, Victoria felt lighter. Her best friend had a way of reframing situations that helped Victoria see the bigger picture. Richard was working hard to provide for their family. His emotional distance was temporary, a side effect of the pressure he carried to maintain their lifestyle. She spent the afternoon resting and preparing for their dinner out. The blue dress still fit, though barely. She styled her hair and put on makeup for the first time in weeks. In the mirror, she saw glimpses of the woman Richard had fallen in love with 20 years ago. By 6 p.m., Victoria felt hopeful about the evening ahead. Richard had made an effort to plan something special. Sarah was right. This was how successful men showed love. Actions, not just words. Her phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. Hi, honey. I am almost ready. Listen, Victoria, I am running about 30 minutes late. Client emergency. But do not worry, I will make it worth the wait. Victoria's heart sank slightly, but she reminded herself of Sarah's words. Of course, I understand. You are the best wife a man could ask for. I love you. I love you too. As Victoria hung up, she tried to hold on to the warmth in Richard's voice. Tonight would be different. Tonight, they would reconnect. That evening, classical music played softly in the background of Aurelio, their favorite restaurant on the Upper East Side. Victoria sat across from Richard in the intimate booth they had shared for anniversaries and special occasions throughout their marriage. Candlelight flickered across the white tablecloth, and the sommelier had just poured their wine-sparkling cider for Victoria, a vintage Bordeaux for Richard. Listen, Victoria, I know I have been distracted lately. This is for you. Richard slid a small velvet box across the table, his deep voice carrying the weight of someone making an important gesture. Victoria opened the box to reveal a diamond bracelet that caught the candlelight like captured stars. Even to her untrained eye, she could tell it was worth a fortune. Richard, it is beautiful, but honestly, I would rather have more time with you. Time is money, sweetheart. This bracelet represents months of deals I closed thinking about you. Every late night, every difficult client meeting I got through it by imagining the moment I could give this to you. Victoria fastened the bracelet around her wrist, the diamonds heavy and cold against her skin. It is gorgeous. Thank you. You deserve beautiful things. Victoria, you deserve a millionaire ex-husband. Richard caught himself, frowning. Sorry, I meant husband. I have been working on too many divorce cases lately. Occupational hazard. Victoria laughed, though something about the slip felt odd. Are you planning to divorce me, Mr. Hartwell? Never. You are stuck with me forever. Richard raised his wineglass. To my beautiful wife and our growing family. They clinked glasses, and Victoria felt the familiar warmth of connection she had been craving. The bracelet might not be what she truly wanted, but the gesture behind it mattered. Richard was trying. "How was your day?" she asked, settling into the conversation she hoped would bring them closer. "Brutal. 3 client meetings, 2 conference calls with Tokyo, and a merger that is falling apart because the CEO is a complete narcissist. The narcissistic abuse some of these executives dish out is unbelievable." "That sounds exhausting." "It is the price of success, I suppose, but it is worth it to provide for you and Emma and the new baby." Richard reached across the table to touch her hand. "Sometimes I think about men who work regular jobs, who come home at 5 p.m. every day, and I wonder if they are happier. But then I remember our life, our apartment, the financial independence we have built, and I know the sacrifice is worth it." Victoria squeezed his hand. "I am proud of what you have accomplished. I just miss spending time together. After this Singapore deal closes, things will calm down. I promise." Their appetizers arrived, and Victoria felt hopeful about the evening. Richard seemed more present than he had been in months. They talked about Emma's development, their plans for the nursery, potential names for the baby. For brief moments, Victoria glimpsed the man she had married attentive, funny, genuinely interested in their life together. Then Richard's phone buzzed on the table. "Sorry, important client. 5 minutes," he said, already standing and walking toward the restaurant's entrance to take the call. Victoria sat alone, watching other couples enjoy uninterrupted dinners. The woman at the next table was laughing at something her husband had said. At another table, a man was showing his wife photos on his phone, both of them leaning in close to look together. Richard's call stretched to 10 minutes, then 15. Victoria could see him through the window, pacing and gesturing emphatically. His body language suggested frustration, possibly anger. When he finally returned, his mood had shifted completely. "Sorry about that. Crisis averted, but barely. Is everything okay? Just work. Nothing for you to worry about." Richard signaled the waiter for another glass of wine. "Where were we?" But the spell was broken. Richard's responses became shorter, distracted. He checked his phone repeatedly despite Victoria's presence. When dessert arrived, he was typing emails. "Richard, He looked up from his phone as if surprised to find her there. "Are you okay? You seem upset about that phone call." "It is nothing. Just some complications with the Singapore deal. My contact there is being difficult about the terms. Maybe we should head home. You seem stressed." "No, no. This is our night." Richard put his phone in his pocket with obvious effort. "Tell me about your day. How was Emma?" Victoria tried to recapture the evening's earlier warmth, but Richard's distraction was palpable. Even when he was looking at her, she felt like he was somewhere else entirely. "Sarah came over this morning to help with Emma," Victoria said. "She is such a good friend." "Sarah is wonderful. We are lucky to have her in our lives. She mentioned that you call her sometimes when work gets stressful." Richard's expression flickered too quickly for Victoria to interpret. "She is a good listener, and she understands the business world in ways that—" He paused. "In ways that I do not. That is not what I meant. I just meant that sometimes it helps to talk to someone who is not emotionally invested in the outcome. You know, someone objective." Victoria nodded, though she felt a familiar sting. Since when was emotional investment a negative thing? Since when did her caring about Richard's well-being make her less qualified to support him? They finished dinner in relative quiet. Richard paid the check, leaving a generous tip, as always, and they walked home through the quiet streets of their neighborhood. The September evening was crisp, and Victoria pulled her wrap closer around her shoulders. "Thank you for tonight," she said as they reached their building. "The bracelet is beautiful." "You are beautiful," Richard replied, kissing her forehead. "I love you, Victoria. I know I am not easy to live with right now, but everything I do is for our family." In the elevator, Victoria studied her husband's profile. He looked older than his 45 years, worry lines etched around his eyes. The pressure of providing for their family was clearly taking a toll. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe this was just how millionaire husbands operated. Maybe expecting more emotional availability was unrealistic, given the financial independence Richard was building for their future. But as they got ready for bed, Victoria could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in their marriage. The man who had once called her just to hear her voice now seemed to view their conversations as obligations to fulfill between more important tasks. "Richard," she said as he climbed into bed beside her, do you still want to be married to me?" He turned to face her, his expression surprised. "Of course. Why would you ask that? Sometimes I feel like we are just going through the motions, like we are roommates instead of partners." Richard pulled her close, her pregnant belly making the embrace awkward but comforting. "I am sorry if I have made you feel that way. Work has been consuming, but it is temporary. Once this baby arrives and I get through the next few deals, things will get back to normal. Promise. Promise." Victoria fell asleep in her husband's arms, the diamond bracelet still on her wrist, catching moonlight from their bedroom window. She wanted to believe that love was enough to bridge the growing distance between them. She wanted to believe that their marriage was strong enough to weather this difficult season. She honestly did not know that 3 weeks later, she would discover just how naive that belief had been. 3 weeks later, Victoria was cleaning Richard's home office while Emma napped in the next room. The space was Richard's sanctuary mahogany desk, leather-bound books, framed photos of their family arranged precisely on built-in shelves. She rarely entered without invitation, but with the baby due in 6 weeks and Richard working longer hours than ever, the office had become neglected. Papers covered every surface. Coffee cups grew rings on the expensive wood. The cleaning lady had been instructed never to touch Richard's work materials, leaving Victoria to navigate around important documents while dusting and organizing. She worked methodically, respecting the invisible boundaries around his business papers while making the space livable again. The vacuum hummed quietly as she cleaned around the desk, careful not to disturb the neat stacks of contracts and legal documents. As she moved the leather desk chair to vacuum beneath it, something wedged between the seat cushions caught her eye. Victoria reached down and pulled out Richard's old iPhone, the one he claimed was completely broken last month when he upgraded to a newer model. She remembered the day distinctly. Richard had shown her the cracked screen, complained about water damage from a client lunch where someone had spilled wine on the table. "Completely destroyed," he had said, tossing it into what she assumed was the garbage. Thank God for cloud backups. But here it was, just powered down, not destroyed at all. Victoria turned the phone over in her hands. Why would Richard lie about something so trivial? Maybe he had forgotten about it, wedged behind the cushions after he got his replacement. Maybe the damage was internal, not visible from the outside. Without fully considering her actions, she pressed the power button. The phone immediately came to life with the familiar Apple startup sound. The screen was intact, responsive to her touch. No water damage, no cracks, no signs of the destruction Richard had described. Notifications began pinging rapidly, dozens of missed calls, unread messages, app updates. The phone had been turned off but was clearly functional. Victoria's finger hovered over the messages icon. She had never snooped through Richard's phone before. In 20 years of marriage, she had trusted him completely, never felt the need to invade his privacy, but something about finding the phone hidden in his office, something about his obvious lie about its condition, made her tap the screen. The Messages app opened to reveal dozens of conversations, but one thread immediately caught her attention. The contact was listed simply as S with a heart emoji. Victoria's hands began to shake as she read the most recent messages. "Cannot wait to see you tonight. Baby. Richard, last night was incredible. When are you leaving her? I love you too." The timestamp showed these messages were from the previous evening, the night Richard had told Victoria he was working late on the Singapore deal. Victoria sank into the desk chair, her pregnant belly making it difficult to breathe. She scrolled up through the message thread, discovering months of intimate exchanges. The messages dated back 8 months, to when she was only 2 months pregnant. "You taste like heaven," from Richard. "Your wife suspects nothing," from S. "I dream about your hands on my body." From Richard. Poor Victoria is so tired all the time. Good thing she has me to help. From Sue. The messages became increasingly explicit and devastating. References to hotel rooms, to lies told, to a future they were planning together. But it was the casual cruelty toward Victoria that made her stomach turn. She has gotten so clingy since the pregnancy, Richard had written. I know, baby, but soon we can be together properly. She will be fine. Women are stronger than they think. S had replied. Victoria scrolled further back, looking for clues about S's identity. The writing style seemed familiar, the frequent use of, oh my God, the superlatives, the way certain phrases were constructed. Then she found a message that made her blood freeze. I brought Victoria flowers today and told her they were from you. She was so grateful. Poor thing has no idea her best friend is fucking her husband. Victoria's phone. Her personal phone began ringing in the living room. She could hear it clearly through the office door, the cheerful ringtone a jarring contrast to the devastation unfolding in her hands. She ignored it and continued reading. Each message a fresh wound. There were photos too, Richard and a woman whose face was always carefully cropped out, but whose body Victoria was beginning to recognize. The personal phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Victoria forced herself to walk to the living room to answer. Richard's phone clutched in her shaking hand. Victoria, oh my God, you sound awful. Are you okay? Sarah's voice, bright and concerned, filled with the same caring tone she had used for 20 years of friendship. I am fine, Sarah. Just tired. You do not sound fine. Want me to come over? Richard mentioned he has another late meeting tonight. Victoria's heart stopped. How do you know about Richard's meeting? A pause, barely perceptible. He texted me to check on you, like he always does when he is working late. You know how he worries about you being alone while pregnant? He texted you to check on me. Oh my God, yes. He is such a thoughtful husband. He asked if I could stop by with dinner for you and Emma tonight. Victoria looked down at Richard's hidden phone, at the message thread with S, at months of deception and betrayal. The casual way Sarah mentioned Richard's schedule, how she always seemed to know his plans, how she appeared whenever he was away. Sarah, how often does Richard text you? Another pause. Just when he is worried about you. Sweetie, why is everything okay? I need to go. Wait, Vic. Victoria hung up and immediately heard voices in the hallway outside their apartment. Richard's distinctive laugh echoed through the thick walls, but he was not alone. A woman's voice responded, familiar, bubbly, using the same inflection Sarah used when she was excited about something. Victoria pressed her ear to the front door of their apartment. We have to be more careful. Sarah, she almost caught us last week. Oh my God, Richard, relax. Victoria trusts me completely. I could tell her we were planning a surprise party, and she would believe me. When this baby comes, things will have to change. We need a plan. I am not waiting forever. You promised me you would tell her after the baby arrives. I know. Just give me time to figure out how to handle the divorce settlement. I cannot afford to lose half of everything. The voices faded as the elevator doors opened and closed. Victoria realized they were meeting in Sarah's apartment 2 floors down in the same building. Her husband and her best friend had been conducting an affair literally under her nose for 8 months. Victoria slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor, Richard's phone still in her hand. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to her racing heartbeat. She wrapped her arms around her belly and tried to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Her husband was cheating on her. Her best friend was the other woman. They had been planning this deception while Victoria was pregnant, vulnerable, dependent on both of them for emotional support. Every time Sarah had come over to help, every time she had encouraged Victoria to be understanding about Richard's distance, every piece of advice about millionaire husbands and financial independence, it had all been manipulation designed to keep Victoria compliant while they conducted their affair. Victoria thought about every conversation with Sarah over the past 8 months. Every time Sarah had defended Richard's behavior, every time she had encouraged Victoria to be grateful instead of demanding more attention, Every time she had positioned herself as the understanding friend while systematically undermining Victoria's marriage. The narcissistic abuse was not coming from Richard's clients. It was coming from the two people Victoria trusted most in the world. She pulled herself up from the floor and walked back to Richard's office, his phone still clutched in her trembling hands. There were hundreds more messages to read, months of evidence to process, but Victoria already knew everything she needed to know. Her marriage was over. Her best friendship was a lie. And she was 6 weeks away from giving birth to a baby whose father was planning to abandon them both for another woman. For the first time in 8 months, Victoria saw her situation with complete clarity. The exhaustion, the isolation, the growing distance, it had not been the natural evolution of marriage and pregnancy. It had been a calculated campaign to make her dependent and grateful while Richard and Sarah built their life together. Victoria looked around Richard's office, at the photos of their family, at the life they had built together over 20 years. Tomorrow, she would have to figure out how to protect herself and her children. Tonight, she needed to understand the full scope of what she was up against. She sat down in Richard's chair and began reading every message, looking at every photo, documenting every lie. She was no longer the exhausted, trusting wife who had woken up that morning. She was a woman gathering evidence for the fight of her life. For the next 2 hours, Victoria sat in Richard's chair, methodically reading through 8 months of betrayal. Each message revealed new layers of deception, new cruelties, new evidence of how completely she had been manipulated. The affair had begun at her own baby shower. She discovered, while Victoria had been opening gifts and thanking friends for celebrating their growing family, Richard and Sarah had apparently shared their first kiss in the kitchen while putting together refreshments. "I cannot stop thinking about today," Sarah had texted the next morning. "When you kissed me while Victoria was opening that ridiculous baby blanket from your mother, I felt more alive than I have in years." "You are incredible," Richard had replied. "I have wanted this for so long, but never thought you felt the same way." Victoria remembered that baby shower, how helpful Sarah had been, how she had insisted on handling all the details, how she had stayed late to clean up while Victoria rested. She had been 6 months pregnant, exhausted, and grateful for her best friend's support. She had no idea that support was a cover for seduction. The messages revealed a pattern of manipulation that was breathtaking in its scope. Sarah had positioned herself as Victoria's primary emotional support while simultaneously undermining her marriage. She encouraged Victoria to be understanding about Richard's late nights, to focus on gratitude instead of demanding attention, to see his distance as a sign of his dedication rather than neglect. "Poor Victoria called me crying again today," Sarah had written to Richard. "She thinks you do not love her anymore. I told her successful men show love through providing, not through constant attention. She bought it completely." "You are brilliant," Richard had replied. "Keep her focused on how lucky she is. The last thing I need is her getting suspicious." Victoria found message after message where Sarah reported back on their private conversations, turning Victoria's vulnerabilities into ammunition for the affair. Every insecurity Victoria had shared, every moment of loneliness, every worry about their marriage, Sarah had fed it all directly to Richard, helping him craft responses that would keep Victoria compliant. But perhaps most devastating were the messages that revealed how they talked about her when she was not around. "God, she has gotten so boring since she got pregnant," Richard had written. "All she wants to talk about is the baby and her feelings." "I know, baby. But think about it, she is doing us a favor by being so needy and emotional. Makes you look like the long-suffering husband instead of the cheating bastard you actually are." Sarah had replied. Victoria's hands shook as she read Richard's response. "When I file for divorce, I want full custody. No way am I letting her take the kids to some apartment while she figures out how to support herself." Oh my God. Can you imagine Victoria trying to get a job after 20 years of being a housewife? She would not last a week in the real world. The messages revealed their entire strategy. They planned to continue the affair until after the baby was born, then manufacture a crisis that would make Richard look like the victim. Sarah would reluctantly admit to Victoria that she had been counseling Richard through their marital problems and that she had developed feelings for him. They would frame it as an emotional affair that had grown into something deeper, rather than the calculated seduction it actually was. Richard's phone buzzed with a new message. Victoria's heart stopped as she saw it was from Sarah. Baby, Victoria sounded weird on the phone earlier. Almost suspicious. Maybe we should cool it for a few days. Victoria stared at the message, realizing that Sarah was texting Richard about their conversation from less than 3 hours ago. The speed of their communication, the casual way they discussed managing her, it made her sick. Another message from Sarah. She asked how I knew about your meeting tonight. I played it off, but she seemed to be paying attention differently. Richard's response came immediately. Do not worry, Victoria is not smart enough to figure anything out. She's been completely clueless for 8 months. Victoria found herself laughing bitterly at Richard's assessment. He was right, she had been completely clueless, but she was not anymore. She scrolled back through months of messages, looking for patterns, for evidence, for anything that might help her understand how she had missed such obvious signs. The restaurant reservations at places she thought she had gone with Richard alone, he had taken Sarah there first. The intimate knowledge Sarah had about Richard's work stress because he told her everything while telling Victoria nothing. The way Sarah always knew Richard's schedule because they were coordinating their secret meetings. Victoria found photos that made her stomach turn. Richard and Sarah in hotel rooms, in restaurants, in what appeared to be Sarah's apartment. They looked happy, relaxed, completely comfortable with their deception. In several photos, Sarah was wearing jewelry that Victoria recognized pieces Richard had given her for birthdays, and anniversaries were apparently gifts Sarah had picked out for herself. One photo showed Sarah wearing the diamond bracelet Richard had given Victoria just 3 weeks ago. The timestamp indicated the photo was taken the day before their dinner at Aurelio. Sarah had been wearing Victoria's anniversary gift while sleeping with Victoria's husband, then had encouraged Victoria to be grateful for Richard's romantic gesture. The manipulation was so thorough, so complete, that Victoria felt dizzy trying to process it all. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every moment of support from Sarah had been designed to keep Victoria in place while they built their relationship behind her back. Victoria's personal phone rang again. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. This time, Victoria answered. Hi, Sarah. Oh my God, Vic, I am so worried about you. You sounded so strange earlier. Are you feeling okay? Is the baby okay? Victoria looked down at Richard's phone, at the messages where Sarah called her boring and needy, where she laughed about Victoria's inability to survive in the real world. I am fine, just tired. Are you sure you do not sound like yourself? How do I usually sound? Sarah. A pause. I do not know. Happier. I guess more like yourself. You have seemed off lately. Off how? Just different. More suspicious. Maybe like you are looking for problems that are not there. Victoria almost laughed at the absurdity. Sarah was coaching her on how to be less suspicious while actively betraying her. Maybe I am finally paying attention. What do you mean? Nothing. I should go. Emma will be up from her nap soon. Wait, do you still want me to bring dinner tonight? Richard said you might need company. When did Richard say that? Another pause. Longer this time. Earlier today, he called to check on you. Victoria looked at Richard's phone. No outgoing calls to Sarah today, which meant they had seen each other in person, probably in Sarah's apartment 2 floors down. That was thoughtful of him, Victoria said carefully. He really is the best husband. You are so lucky. Vic, not every woman gets a millionaire ex-husband, husband who cares so much about her well-being. The slip was subtle, but Victoria caught it. Sarah had almost said millionaire ex-husband, just like Richard had at dinner 3 weeks ago. They were already thinking of Victoria in the past tense. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course, anything. Do you think I am smart? What? Oh my God. Why would you ask that? Just curious about your honest opinion. You are brilliant. Vic, you are an amazing mother, a wonderful wife, a loyal friend. You are one of the smartest women I know. Victoria looked down at the messages where Sarah called her boring and clueless, where she laughed about Victoria's inability to function in the real world. Thank you. That means a lot. Are you sure you are okay? You are starting to worry me. I am perfect. Everything is perfect. After hanging up, Victoria sat in silence for several minutes. The level of deception was staggering, but what struck her most was how natural it seemed to come to both of them. Sarah lied as easily as breathing, switching between manipulation and false concern without missing a beat. Richard dismissed 20 years of marriage as casually as he would cancel a business meeting. Victoria looked around Richard's office, at the photos of their family, at the evidence of the life they had built together. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight was probably the last night she would spend in this apartment as Richard's wife. The last night she would live in the naive belief that her marriage was worth saving. But Victoria was no longer the trusting, exhausted woman who had found the phone 4 hours ago. She was a woman who finally understood the game being played around her, and she was ready to start playing by her own rules. The baby kicked hard, as if approving of her newfound clarity. Victoria placed her hand on her belly and made a silent promise. She would protect her children from this toxicity. She would not let them grow up thinking this kind of betrayal was normal. She would not go quietly into the divorce Richard and Sarah were planning for her. The next morning, Victoria pretended everything was normal. She made coffee, prepared Emma's breakfast, and greeted Richard with the same tired smile she had worn for months. The performance felt surreal, but she needed time to plan her next move. Listen, Victoria, Sarah called me last night. She wants to take you shopping for baby clothes today, Richard said, buttering his toast with the casual air of a man who believed his wife was still completely deceived. That is thoughtful of her. She really cares about this family. We are lucky to have such a good friend. Richard checked his phone, the new one, since he did not know Victoria had found his old device. I have meetings all day, but Sarah thought you might enjoy getting out of the apartment. Victoria nodded, stirring her coffee slowly. Sarah always knows what I need. She has great instincts about people, especially women. She understands things about relationships that most people miss. The irony was breathtaking. Richard was praising Sarah's relationship insights while Sarah systematically destroyed his marriage. But Victoria kept her expression neutral, playing the role of the trusting wife one more day. I should get ready then. What time is she picking me up? 11. And Victoria. Richard reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Buy whatever you want for the baby. Money is no object. You are very generous, Victoria replied, thinking about the messages where Richard complained about her spending, where he called her financially naive and dependent. After Richard left for work, Victoria sat in their living room and tried to process the magnitude of what she was about to do. For 20 years, Sarah had been her closest confidant, the person she turned to for advice about everything from career decisions to parenting challenges. The idea that Sarah had been systematically betraying her for months felt impossible to accept, even with the evidence literally in her hands. But the messages did not lie. The timestamps, the intimate details, the casual cruelty, it was all there in black and white. Victoria spent the morning researching divorce attorneys on her laptop, creating email accounts Richard did not know about, and taking photos of important financial documents. If Richard wanted to play games, she would be prepared. At exactly 11 a.m., Sarah knocked on the door. Oh my God, Vic, you look so much better today. I was really worried about you yesterday. Sarah looked perfect, as always. Designer jeans, silk blouse, hair styled in effortless waves. She moved through Victoria's apartment with the confidence of someone who felt completely secure in her deception. I feel better. Thank you for suggesting this shopping trip. Of course, besides, this baby deserves the best. Just like Richard deserves to be happy. The comment felt pointed, loaded with meaning Victoria was not supposed to understand. But now she heard the subtext in everything Sarah said. They drove to the upscale baby boutique where Victoria had shopped for Emma 2 years earlier. Sarah chatted easily during the drive, asking about Victoria's pregnancy symptoms, commenting on how hard Richard had been working, offering advice about preparing for 2 children. "You are so lucky to have financial independence," Sarah said as they browsed $1,000 cribs. "Most women cannot afford to shop without worrying about every purchase. Richard is a good provider. The best. He works so hard to give you this lifestyle. Not every woman appreciates what that sacrifice means for a man." Victoria selected a crib and matching dresser, watching Sarah's face for reactions. "These are beautiful. Richard said to buy whatever I want. See, that is what I mean. He wants you to have everything. How many millionaire ex-husbands would be so generous?" There it was again, the slip about ex-husbands. Sarah was getting careless, or maybe she was testing to see if Victoria would notice. "Sarah, is there something you want to tell me about Richard?" Sarah's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "What do you mean? You keep saying ex-husband instead of husband. Is that some kind of Freudian slip?" "Oh my God, Victoria, I think you are reading too much into a simple mistake. I probably just have divorce on my mind because my neighbor is going through a messy separation." But Sarah's voice had changed slightly, higher pitched, faster, more defensive. "And you seem to know a lot about Richard's work schedule lately. More than I do. Sometimes. He calls me when he is worried about you. You know how men are, they process stress by talking to people outside the situation." Victoria nodded as if accepting the explanation, but she was studying Sarah's body language, the way she avoided eye contact when talking about Richard, the way she touched her necklace nervously, the way she seemed to be working harder to maintain her usual bubbly energy. "Sarah, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Anything." "Do you ever get lonely, not having a husband or children of your own?" Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment. "Sometimes, but I have you and Richard and Emma. You are like family to me. What if you met someone who made you feel like you could have your own family? I mean, hypothetically, if I met the right person, I would want to be with them. But finding a good man is hard. Most of the ones worth having are already taken." Victoria felt sick. Sarah was talking about Richard about stealing someone else's husband while shopping for Victoria's baby. What if the person you met was married? Would that change things? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, pretending to examine a baby blanket. That would be complicated. Oh, how complicated. Well, if two people really loved each other, if they had a genuine connection that could not be ignored, I think sometimes the heart wants what it wants, regardless of circumstances, even if it meant hurting innocent people, like the wife and children. Oh my God, Vic, this is getting really heavy. Are you worried about something specific? Victoria looked directly at Sarah, studying her face carefully. I am worried about women who think they can justify destroying families because they want what someone else has built. Sarah's face went pale. Why would you say something like that? Because I think some women mistake loneliness for love. They convince themselves that married men are unhappy so they can feel better about pursuing them. Victoria, you are starting to scare me. Where is this coming from? I am just thinking about loyalty, I guess. About what it means to be a real friend versus someone who pretends to care while working against you. They stared at each other across the baby boutique, the pretense finally cracking. Sarah's usual confident mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Are you accusing me of something? Sarah asked quietly. Should I be? Sarah's laugh sounded forced. Oh my God, Victoria, you are being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones can make women really suspicious and irrational. Or maybe they make women see things more clearly. The shopping trip ended in tense silence. Sarah drove Victoria home without her usual cheerful chatter, and Victoria let her go without the customary invitation to stay for coffee. That evening, Victoria cooked Richard's favorite dinner and waited for him to come home. She was no longer gathering evidence; she had enough to destroy both of them. Now she was planning her strategy. When Richard finally arrived at 9 p.m., he seemed surprised by the elaborate meal waiting for him. This is wonderful, sweetheart. What is the occasion? No occasion. I just wanted to do something nice for my husband. As they ate, Victoria asked careful questions about Richard's day, his stress level, his plans for the weekend. She watched his face as he lied to her, noting how easily the deception came to him. "How was shopping with Sarah today?" he asked. "Interesting. We had a good talk about relationships and loyalty. Sarah is full of wisdom about those things. She certainly has strong opinions about married men." Richard looked up from his dinner. "What do you mean?" "Just something she said about following your heart, even when circumstances are complicated." Richard's expression did not change, but Victoria saw his jaw tighten slightly. "Sarah is a romantic. She believes in true love." "Do you believe in true love?" "Richard, of course. I married you. Did I not? Do you still love me?" "Listen, Victoria, where is this coming from? You have been asking strange questions all evening. I have been thinking about our marriage lately, about whether we are both still committed to making it work." "Why would you doubt that?" Victoria looked across the table at her husband of 20 years, the father of her children, the man who was planning to divorce her for her best friend. "I suppose I wonder sometimes if people can change so completely that they become strangers to themselves. People grow and evolve. That is natural in a long marriage." "Is that what you call it? Evolution?" Richard set down his fork. "Victoria, you are acting very strange lately. Are you feeling okay? Should we call your doctor?" The dismissal was so casual, so practiced. Richard had been deflecting her concerns for months, making her question her own perceptions, while he built a life with another woman. "I feel clearer than I have in months," Victoria replied. "Like I am finally seeing things as they really are, instead of how I hoped they would be." That night, as Richard slept beside her, Victoria stared at the ceiling and planned her next move. Tomorrow, she would start building the life she and her children deserved, a life free from the narcissistic abuse of people who claimed to love her, while systematically destroying her. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been illuminating. Victoria finally understood that she was stronger than either Richard or Sarah had given her credit for. Strong enough to walk away from a marriage built on lies. Strong enough to protect her children from growing up in a house where manipulation was mistaken for love. Strong enough to win the fight they did not even know was coming. That afternoon, Victoria sat in her car outside the baby boutique, her hands shaking as she dialed the number she had found online. "Sterling and Associates. Margaret Sterling speaking." "Miss Sterling, my name is Victoria Hartwell. I need to discuss a divorce." "I see. Are you available to meet today? I have an opening at 4 p.m. Victoria looked at her watch. 2:15. "I will be there." Margaret Sterling's office occupied the top floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan. The waiting room was elegant but understated, expensive furniture, original artwork, the kind of quiet luxury that suggested serious money changed hands here. Margaret herself was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who had seen every possible variation of marital betrayal. She gestured for Victoria to sit across from her desk. "Mrs. Hartwell, what brings you to my office today?" Victoria had rehearsed this conversation during the drive, but actually saying the words felt surreal. "My husband is having an affair with my best friend. I found evidence on his phone, and I want to file for divorce." "How long has the affair been going on?" 8 months, since I was 2 months pregnant with our second child." Margaret's expression did not change, but Victoria saw something flicker in her eyes: disapproval. Maybe, or recognition of a particularly cruel betrayal. "What kind of evidence do you have?" Victoria pulled out printed screenshots from Richard's phone. Text messages, photos, detailed conversations about their relationship and their plans to divorce me after the baby is born. Margaret studied the documents carefully. "Mrs. Hartwell, you need to understand that you accessed your husband's phone without permission. This evidence might not be admissible in court." Victoria's heart sank. "So it does not matter what I found." "It matters, but we need to be strategic about how we use it. Tell me about your financial situation." Richard owns an investment firm. We live in a penthouse on the Upper East Side. Our net worth is approximately $24 million. Weigh in your personal assets. Everything is in Richard's name. The apartment, the business, the investment accounts. I have not worked outside the home in 15 years. Margaret made notes on a legal pad. Children. Emma is 2. The baby is due in 4 weeks. Mrs. Hartwell, your husband has significant financial resources and will hire excellent attorneys. If he is planning to file for divorce after your child is born, he is probably already preparing his case. We need to move quickly and strategically. What do you recommend? First, we gather evidence through legal means. I have investigators who can document the affair without relying on the phone access. Second, we protect your interests, immediately separate accounts, documentation of all assets, preparation for custody arrangements. Victoria felt overwhelmed. How long will this take? If your husband contests the divorce, it could take years, but Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to understand something important. New York is a no-fault divorce state, which means adultery is not automatically grounds for a larger settlement. We need to prove that your husband's actions have caused you significant financial or emotional harm. What about custody? That depends on many factors. Your husband's resources, his ability to provide stability, the children's best interests. The affair might influence the judge's opinion, but it is not determinative. Victoria left Margaret's office feeling both hopeful and terrified. The legal process would be complicated and expensive, but at least she had options. Over the next 3 days, Victoria quietly gathered information. She photographed financial documents, researched Richard's business partners, and created detailed timelines of his lies and absences. She also made a decision that surprised her with its boldness. Sarah, it is Victoria. Are you free Saturday night? Oh my God, of course. What is going on? I want to throw you a surprise birthday party. Your 39th is next week, right? Vic, you do not have to do that. You are so close to your due date. I want to. You have been such an amazing friend, especially during this pregnancy. Let me do something special for you. Victoria could practically hear Sarah's internal struggle through the phone. Refusing would seem suspicious, but accepting meant spending an evening pretending to be surprised while surrounded by people who knew her as Victoria's loyal best friend. That sounds wonderful. Where are you thinking? Our apartment. I will invite everyone, college friends, your work colleagues, Richard's business partners. A real celebration. Richard will be there. Of course, it would not be a party without him. The following Saturday, Victoria spent the day preparing. She hired caterers, decorated the apartment, sent invitations to 50 of Sarah's friends and acquaintances. Everyone was excited to celebrate Sarah, praising Victoria for organizing such a thoughtful surprise. By 7 p.m., the apartment was filled with guests. Victoria positioned herself where she could observe Richard and Sarah's interactions without being obvious about it. The first thing she noticed was how they moved around each other, a choreographed dance of casual touches and meaningful glances. Richard brought Sarah drinks without being asked. Sarah anticipated his needs, appearing at his elbow with appetizers or introductions to people he wanted to meet. Victoria, this party is incredible, said Jennifer, one of Sarah's work colleagues. Sarah is so lucky to have a friend like you. Sarah is very special to our family, Victoria replied, watching Richard's hand brush Sarah's shoulder as he passed behind her chair. The interactions were subtle but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. The way Sarah laughed at Richard's jokes with genuine delight instead of polite social interest. The way Richard's attention followed Sarah around the room, even when he was engaged in conversations with other people. The comfortable intimacy that had developed between them over 8 months of deception. Victoria's college friend Amy approached with a concerned expression. Vic, are you feeling okay? You look tired. Just pregnancy exhaustion? The baby will be here soon? Are you sure that is all you seem? I do not know. Different tonight. More watchful. Victoria realized she had been too obvious in her observations. I am fine. Just making sure everyone is having a good time. At 9 p.m., Victoria called for attention to make a toast. The room quieted as guests gathered around, champagne glasses raised. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate Sarah," Victoria began. "Sarah has been my closest friend for 20 years. She has supported me through every major life event, offered advice during difficult times, and become like family to Richard and me." Guests murmured approval. Sarah beamed, playing the role of surprise birthday girl perfectly. "In fact," Victoria continued, "Sarah has become so integral to our lives that I honestly do not know what we would do without her. She and Richard have developed such a close friendship, and she has been especially supportive during my pregnancy." Victoria watched Richard's face as she spoke. He looked uncomfortable, though most people would probably interpret it as modesty rather than guilt. "So here is to Sarah," Victoria raised her glass, "to friendship, loyalty, and the people who show us who they really are when we need them most." The toast felt pointed to Victoria, but the guests responded with enthusiasm. Sarah hugged her tightly, whispering, "Oh my God, Vic, you are going to make me cry." As the evening progressed, Victoria continued her careful observations. She watched Richard and Sarah navigate conversations with mutual friends, maintaining their cover while communicating through subtle glances and gestures. She noted how naturally they worked together, finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes that other people did not understand. At one point, Victoria overheard Richard talking to one of his business partners about the challenges of marriage and career balance. "The key is having the right support system," Richard said. "Victoria has been incredible, as of course, but having friends like Sarah who understand both of us has made all the difference." "Sarah is wonderful," the colleague agreed. "You and Victoria are lucky to have such a loyal friend." Victoria almost laughed at the irony. Everyone could see the connection between Richard and Sarah, but they interpreted it as a close friendship rather than an affair. The deception was hiding in plain sight. As guests began to leave around 11 p.m., Victoria felt exhausted but oddly satisfied. The evening had confirmed everything she suspected and given her additional evidence of how long the affair had been developing. Sarah stayed to help clean up, as Victoria had known she would. "That was amazing. Vic, I cannot believe you planned all of that while being so pregnant." "It was my pleasure. You deserve to be celebrated." Richard joined them in the kitchen, loading glasses into the dishwasher. "Great party. Victoria, Sarah, I hope you had a good time." "The best. You guys are incredible." Victoria watched them work together, noting the easy familiarity, the way they moved around each other without awkwardness. This was what people looked like when they were comfortable together, when they had spent significant time in intimate spaces. "Well, I should head home," Sarah said finally. "Thank you again for everything." After Sarah left, Victoria and Richard finished cleaning in relative silence. The performance was over, and Victoria felt drained from maintaining her facade for 6 hours. "That was thoughtful of you," Richard said as they got ready for bed. "Sarah seemed really happy." "She did she not?" Victoria replied. "Almost like she felt at home here." Richard glanced at her sharply, but Victoria was already turning away, heading toward the bathroom to brush her teeth. The party had served its purpose. Victoria now had dozens of witnesses to the obvious connection between Richard and Sarah, even if they did not understand what they had observed. More importantly, she had confirmed that her husband and best friend were comfortable enough in their deception to conduct it publicly, confident that Victoria would never suspect the truth. Tomorrow, Victoria would take the next step in protecting herself and her children. Tonight, she fell asleep knowing that the people who had betrayed her were finally going to face consequences for their actions. The baby kicked actively, as if sensing the change coming to their world. Victoria placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "Do not worry, little one. Mama's going to make sure we are safe." For the first time in months, Victoria felt powerful instead of powerless. The game was changing, and she was finally playing to win. After the last guest left Sarah's birthday party, Victoria sent Emma to her grandmother's house for the night. "I need to have an important conversation with Daddy and Sarah," she told her mother-in-law over the phone, "about the new baby and some changes coming to our family." Richard looked surprised when Victoria asked him to call Sarah and invite her back over. Is everything okay? You seem tense. I need to discuss something with both of you. It involves all three of us. 20 minutes later, Sarah knocked on the door, her earlier party enthusiasm replaced by obvious nervousness. Oh my God! Vic, what is going on? You sounded so serious on the phone. Victoria led them both to the living room, where she had arranged 3 chairs in a triangle. The apartment felt different now, quieter, more serious, like a courtroom waiting for proceedings to begin. Please sit down, both of you. Richard and Sarah exchanged glances before taking their seats. Victoria remained standing, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. I found your old phone. Richard. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Richard's face went completely blank, while Sarah's eyes widened in what appeared to be genuine shock. Listen, Victoria, I can explain. Can you explain 8 months of text messages between you and my best friend? Can you explain photos of you together in hotel rooms? Can you explain planning my divorce while I was pregnant with your child? Sarah leaned forward, her face pale. Oh my God, what phone, Richard? You said your old phone was completely destroyed. Apparently it was just turned off and hidden in your office, Victoria continued, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her chest. Hidden between the cushions of your desk chair, where I found it 3 days ago. Richard stood up, his jaw tight. You had no right to go through my private property. Private property? Victoria's voice rose slightly. You are my husband. We are having a baby together. Since when do married couples have private property when it comes to secret relationships? Vic, listen. This is not what you think, Sarah began. Do not call me Vic. Friends do not sleep with friends' husbands while pretending to support their marriages. The accusation finally broke through Sarah's pretense. Her shoulders sagged, and the bright, bubbly mask she had worn for months slipped away completely. How long have you known? Sarah asked quietly. Since Tuesday. I have spent the last 4 days reading every single message between you two. Every lie, every cruel comment about me, every plan you made for your future together. Richard moved toward Victoria, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Victoria, you need to calm down. This is not good for the baby. Do not tell me to calm down. Do not use my pregnancy as a weapon against me. You started this affair when I was 2 months pregnant. You have been planning to leave me since before you knew if this baby was healthy. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Victoria's voice echoed through the apartment. You made a choice. Both of you made choices. Every day for 8 months, you chose to lie to me, to manipulate me, to make me feel grateful for scraps of attention while you built a life together behind my back. Sarah was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Victoria, I never meant for it to happen. It grew into something neither of us expected. When did it start? Sarah, at my baby shower. While I was opening gifts for the child you were helping Richard plan to abandon. Sarah's face crumpled. It was not like that. What was it like then? Explain to me how seducing my husband while I was pregnant was not exactly what it looks like. Richard stepped between them, his voice harder now. Listen, Victoria, Sarah and I have developed feelings for each other. These things happen in marriages. People grow apart, find connections with other people. It does not make us monsters. Victoria stared at her husband, amazed by his ability to minimize 8 months of systematic betrayal. Feelings. Is that what you call planning my divorce? Is that what you call discussing custody arrangements? Is that what you call laughing about my inability to survive in the real world? You read private conversations out of context. Context. Victoria pulled out her phone and began reading directly from the screenshots she had saved. Richard texting Sarah. God, she has gotten so boring since she got pregnant. All she wants to talk about is the baby and her feelings. Your response, Sarah. I know, baby. But think about it, she is doing us a favor by being so needy and emotional. makes you look like the long-suffering husband instead of the cheating bastard you actually are. Sarah flinched as if slapped. I was just venting. People say things when they are frustrated. People, you mean adulterers, manipulators, people who think narcissistic abuse is acceptable as long as they get what they want. Victoria continued reading. Richard, when I file for divorce, I want full custody. No way am I letting her take the kids to some apartment while she figures out how to support herself. Sarah, oh my God, can you imagine Victoria trying to get a job after 20 years of being a housewife? She would not last a week in the real world. The room fell silent except for Sarah's quiet sobbing. Richard's face had hardened into something Victoria barely recognized. Those were private thoughts between two people trying to figure out a complicated situation, he said finally. Complicated? Victoria laughed bitterly. What is complicated about adultery? What is complicated about lying to your pregnant wife for 8 months while planning to steal her children? You are being dramatic. Let me read you one more message. Richard, this one is from last week. I cannot wait to get Victoria out of our lives permanently. She has been dead weight for years, and now we can finally be together without pretending to care about her feelings. Richard's mask finally slipped completely. You know what, Victoria? Maybe I did say those things. Maybe I meant them. Maybe I have been unhappy for longer than you want to admit. Then why did you not divorce me before starting an affair? Why did you not have the courage to end our marriage honestly instead of making me complice in my own humiliation? Because divorce is expensive. Because custody battles are messy. Because it was easier to manage the situation until we could do it on our terms. The honesty was breathtaking in its cruelty. Victoria felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, which had been shattered days ago, but her last connection to the man she had married 20 years ago. Our terms, Sarah looked up from her tears, her face streaked with makeup. Victoria, we never wanted to hurt you. We were trying to find a way to transition that would be best for everyone. Best for everyone. You mean best for you and Richard. I was never part of the equation. Was I just an obstacle to manage until you could get rid of me? That is not. It is exactly that. Victoria sat down heavily, her pregnancy making it difficult to stand for long periods. You turned my best friend against me. You used my vulnerabilities as ammunition. You made me feel grateful for the smallest gestures while you gave the real relationship to someone else. Richard sat down across from her, his business mask back in place. Victoria, we can handle this like adults. We can work out custody arrangements, financial settlements, everything. It does not have to be ugly. Adults, Victoria stared at him. Adults do not conduct 8-month affairs. Adults do not manipulate pregnant women. Adults do not plan to steal children from their mothers. I am not stealing anything. I am providing a stable home. With your mistress, you think a judge is going to award custody to an adulterous father and his home-wrecking girlfriend. Sarah stood up abruptly. I am not a homewrecker. Your marriage was already over. Victoria, Richard was miserable. I just offered him something better. Something better. Victoria looked between them. These two people who had systematically destroyed her life while claiming to care about her. What exactly are you offering him? Sarah, because I can tell you what I offered 20 years of loyalty. 2 children, complete financial dependence, and apparently the perfect cover for his affair. We offer each other real partnership, real understanding, real love. Real love does not require destroying innocent people. Real love does not build itself on lies and manipulation. Richard checked his watch, as if this conversation was just another business meeting he needed to wrap up efficiently. Victoria, we can argue about this all night, or we can start discussing practical arrangements. Sarah and I are going to be together. That is not changing. The question is whether we handle this transition cooperatively or through lawyers. Victoria stood up slowly, her hand pressed to her lower back. Richard, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not transitioning anywhere. This is my home, my family, my life. If you want to be with Sarah, you can leave. Tonight. You cannot kick me out of my own apartment. Watch me. Sarah, you need to leave too. Right now. Sarah looked to Richard for support, but he was staring at Victoria with something that might have been surprise or respect. Victoria, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I am being more reasonable than either of you deserve. I could have called your business partners. Richard, I could have sent these text messages to Sarah's clients. I could have made your affair public before giving you a chance to explain yourselves. You would not try me. You have 20 minutes to pack a bag and get out. Both of you. The ultimatum hung in the air between them. For 8 months, Richard and Sarah had controlled the narrative, managed Victoria's reactions, planned her future without her input. Now, suddenly, she was the one making demands. Listen, Victoria, Richard began, you are being emotional. I am being strategic. You want a divorce, you can have one, but you will not dictate the terms, and you will not use my children as leverage. Get out of my home. Now. Sarah looked between Victoria and Richard, clearly hoping he would take charge of the situation, but Richard seemed genuinely shocked by Victoria's sudden assertiveness. Where are we supposed to go? Sarah asked. That is not my problem anymore, Victoria replied. You have been planning this for 8 months. Surely you have considered living arrangements. Richard stood up, his face hard. Fine, but Victoria, you have no idea what you are starting. I have resources you cannot imagine. Lawyers, investigators, business connections. If you want to fight this, you will lose everything. I already lost everything. The difference is, now I know it. 20 minutes later, Victoria stood alone in her apartment, listening to the silence that had replaced 20 years of marriage. She felt empty but not broken, exhausted but not defeated. The baby kicked strongly, as if responding to the dramatic change in their environment. Victoria placed both hands on her belly and whispered, It is just you and me and Emma now, little one. But we are going to be okay. Better than okay. For the first time in months, Victoria felt like herself again. Not the grateful, accommodating wife Richard had trained her to be. Not the trusting, naive friend Sarah had manipulated. Just Victoria, stronger than either of them had given her credit for, and finally ready to fight for the life she and her children deserved. The war was just beginning, but Victoria had won the first battle. She had reclaimed her home, her dignity, and her right to determine her own future. Outside, the city hummed with late-night energy. Inside, Victoria began planning the next phase of her life, a life built on truth instead of lies, on genuine love instead of manipulation, on the kind of strength she had never known she possessed. 6 months later, Victoria stood in family court holding her 3-month-old son, Michael, while Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the final settlement documents. The courtroom was smaller than Victoria had expected, but the weight of the moment felt enormous. Mr. Hartwell, Judge Morrison's authoritative voice cut through the quiet room. You will pay Mrs. Hartwell 50% of all marital assets, totaling approximately $12 million, plus child support of $15,000 per month until both children reach age 18. Richard's attorney leaned over to whisper something urgent in his ear, but Richard shook his head curtly. He looked older than his 45 years, the stress of the past 6 months etched in new lines around his eyes. Your Honor, this settlement is excessive given that my client was the primary earner throughout the marriage. Richard's lawyer objected. Judge Morrison looked up from her papers with the expression of someone who had heard every possible excuse for marital betrayal. Mr. Hartwell, adultery with your wife's best friend during her pregnancy demonstrates a level of moral failing that warrants significant financial consequence. The settlement stands as written. Victoria's attorney, Margaret Sterling, leaned over and whispered, You will never have to worry about money again. Mrs. Hartwell, this gives you complete financial independence. Victoria nodded, adjusting baby Michael in her arms. The past 6 months had been the most difficult of her life, but also the most transformative. The scared, dependent woman who had discovered Richard's phone was gone, replaced by someone Victoria was still getting to know, someone stronger, wiser, and absolutely unwilling to accept less than she deserved. The divorce proceedings had been brutal but swift. Margaret's investigators had documented Richard and Sarah's affair in devastating detail. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even security footage from Sarah's apartment building showing Richard's regular visits. The evidence was so overwhelming that Richard's legal team had advised him to settle rather than risk a trial that would make the details public. Mrs. Hartwell, Judge Morrison continued, you are awarded primary physical custody of both children, with Mr. Hartwell receiving supervised visitation every other weekend until such time as he completes court-mandated counseling for narcissistic abuse patterns. Richard's face flushed red. Your Honor, I hardly think, Mr. Hartwell, the evidence presented to this court shows a pattern of emotional manipulation and psychological abuse spanning several years. Your affair was merely the culmination of behaviors that demonstrate unfitness for unsupervised custody. Victoria felt a surge of vindication. Margaret had argued brilliantly that Richard's treatment of Victoria constituted emotional abuse, the systematic undermining of her confidence, the isolation from support systems, the financial control, the gaslighting about his obvious affair. The judge had agreed. Furthermore, Judge Morrison added, Mr. Hartwell is prohibited from introducing the children to any romantic partner for a minimum of 12 months, and any future cohabitation arrangements must be approved by this court. This meant Richard could not move in with Sarah immediately, could not play house with Victoria's children while the divorce was still fresh. Another victory Margaret had fought for and won. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited on the steps. Victoria's story had attracted media attention when Richard's business partners learned about the affair and the circumstances surrounding it. Several major clients had pulled their investments, citing concerns about Richard's character and judgment. Victoria made a brief statement to the assembled cameras. I want to thank all the women who supported me through this difficult time. When we face betrayal, especially from people we trusted most, it can feel like the end of the world. But I have learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to your best life. We are stronger together, and we deserve relationships built on honesty and genuine love. A reporter called out, Mrs. Hartwell, do you have any comment about Sarah Chen's recent bankruptcy filing? Victoria paused. She had heard that Sarah's marketing agency had collapsed after several clients learned about her role in breaking up Victoria's marriage. The affair had cost Sarah her business, her reputation, and ultimately her relationship with Richard, who had blamed her for the public nature of their exposure. I hope everyone involved finds a way to build authentic happiness instead of trying to steal someone else's, Victoria replied diplomatically. Margaret walked Victoria to her car, where Emma was waiting with Victoria's mother. The 2-year-old ran to her mother with the boundless energy of a child who had been sitting still too long. Mama baby. Emma pointed excitedly at Michael, who was sleeping peacefully despite the courthouse chaos. That is right, sweetheart. Your baby brother, Victoria's mother, Patricia, had been a rock throughout the divorce proceedings. How do you feel? Honey, free, Victoria replied without hesitation. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. The drive home took them through Central Park, where Victoria had spent countless hours during her pregnancy, walking and thinking about her future. The apartment Richard had been forced to leave was officially hers now, but Victoria had already decided to sell it. Too many memories, too much history. She wanted a fresh start somewhere that belonged entirely to her and the children. That evening, Victoria sat in her new apartment, a spacious 3-bedroom, overlooking the park that she had purchased with her settlement money. Emma played with her toys while Michael slept in his bassinet nearby. The space felt peaceful in a way their old home never had. Victoria's phone rang. She almost did not answer when she saw Richard's name, but custody arrangements required some communication. What do you need, Richard? Listen, Victoria. His voice sounded defeated, older. I know I do not have the right to ask, but could we talk about the kids? About everything? We can talk about the children through our lawyers. just like the judge ordered. I made mistakes. Huge mistakes. I realize that now. Victoria looked at her children, Emma building towers with blocks, Michael making soft sleeping sounds. Richard, you did not make mistakes. You made choices. For 8 months, you chose to lie to me, to manipulate me, to plan my destruction while I was carrying your child. Those were not mistakes. They were deliberate actions. Sarah and I are over, have been for months. The whole thing was a disaster. I know. I also know that you are only sorry because there were consequences you did not expect. You are not sorry for hurting me or the children. You are sorry that your plan did not work. A long pause. Maybe you are right. Maybe I became someone I do not recognize. Maybe you just became who you always were, and I finally saw it clearly. The kids need their father. Victoria, they need a father who puts their well-being first. When you are ready to be that person, really ready, not just saying the words we can discuss expanding your visitation. Until then, supervised weekends are what the court decided was safe. After hanging up, Victoria felt no satisfaction in Richard's obvious regret. She had moved beyond anger months ago, settling into something more powerful: indifference. Richard's problems were no longer her problems. His unhappiness was no longer her responsibility to fix. Victoria's laptop chimed with an email notification. Her book proposal had been accepted by a major publisher. Rebuilding After Betrayal, A Guide to Midlife Transformation, would be published the following year. The advance was substantial, but more importantly, the book would help other women navigate similar situations. She had also started a support group for women facing midlife divorce, meeting every Thursday evening in a community center near her apartment. The group had grown from 5 women to 23 in just 4 months. Hearing other women's stories, offering support and practical advice had become one of the most meaningful parts of Victoria's new life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Martinez at the Today Show. Would love to schedule that interview we discussed. Your story is inspiring so many women. Victoria typed back, happy to discuss. When women support each other authentically, amazing things happen. As she prepared for bed that night, Victoria reflected on how completely her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a dependent housewife, grateful for scraps of attention from a husband who was actively betraying her. Tonight, she was a financially independent woman with a book deal, a support group, media opportunities, and most importantly, complete control over her own destiny. The baby monitor crackled as Michael stirred in his crib. Victoria went to check on him, finding him awake and alert, his dark eyes tracking her movement. "Hello, little man," she whispered, lifting him for a late-night feeding. "Are you ready to hear about the life we are building together?" As Michael nursed, Victoria looked out her new apartment windows at the city lights twinkling below. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably regretting his choices, wondering how his carefully planned life had fallen apart so completely. Somewhere else, other women were discovering text messages, finding evidence of betrayal, facing the same impossible choice Victoria had faced 6 months ago. But Victoria was no longer that woman. She was no longer someone who accepted less than she deserved, who made excuses for people who hurt her, who confused manipulation with love. She had built something better from the ashes of her marriage, not just financial independence, but emotional independence, the kind of strength that could not be taken away by someone else's choices. Michael finished eating and fell back asleep in her arms. Victoria held him close, thinking about the lessons she would teach both her children about love, respect, and the difference between people who claim to care about you and people who actually do. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new ways to use her experience to help other women find their own strength. But tonight, Victoria was exactly where she belonged, in a home filled with authentic love, surrounded by people who valued her completely, building a life that no one could take away from her. The transformation was complete. Victoria Hartwell was no longer a victim of other people's choices. She was the author of her own story, and the next chapter was going to be extraordinary. 2 years later, Victoria sat in the same coffee shop where her story had begun. But everything else had changed. The familiar sounds of ceramic mugs clinking and steam hissing from the espresso machine created a comforting backdrop as she typed the final chapter of her second book on her laptop. Large oat milk latte for Victoria, called the barista a different young woman, but with the same kind eyes that had offered comfort during Victoria's darkest period. Thank you. Victoria accepted the warm cup gratefully, noting how different this moment felt from that exhausting morning 3 years ago, when she had fumbled with Emma's stroller while Richard confused her with mysterious phone calls. Emma, now 5, sat beside her mother coloring in a princess book, while 4-year-old Michael built elaborate structures with magnetic tiles on the small table. Both children were confident, chatty, secure in ways that spoke to the stability Victoria had created for their family. "Mommy, is this where you used to come when you were sad?" Emma asked, looking up from her coloring with the matter-of-fact curiosity of a child who had heard stories but did not quite understand their weight. "This is where I came when I needed to think," Victoria replied carefully. "Before you had your baby brother, before we moved to our new apartment, before Mommy learned how strong she really was." "Were you scared?" Victoria considered the question seriously. Emma deserved honest answers, age-appropriate but truthful. "Sometimes, but being scared is not always bad, sweetheart. Sometimes it tells us we need to make changes to feel safe again." The barista approached their table, wiping her hands on her apron. "Excuse me, are you Victoria Hartwell, the author?" Victoria looked up, still adjusting to being recognized in public. Her first book had become a bestseller, and her appearances on morning shows had made her face familiar to women across the country. "I am. I just wanted to say thank you. My sister read your book after she discovered her husband was cheating, and it gave her the courage to leave. She has her own apartment now, and she is so much happier. I am glad the book helped her. That is why I wrote it." After the barista returned to work, Victoria reflected on how surreal these interactions still felt. Her personal catastrophe had become a source of strength for thousands of other women. The support group she had started now met 3 times a week in different locations around the city. She received hundreds of emails from women sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. The Today Show interview had led to speaking engagements at women's conferences. The speaking engagements had led to a consulting business helping women achieve financial independence after divorce. The consulting business had generated enough income that Victoria now employed 4 other women, all divorce survivors themselves. Her phone buzzed with a text from her literary agent. "Second book advance confirmed. Publisher wants to discuss a 3-book deal. You are building an empire." Victoria, an empire. Victoria smiled at the phrase. 3 years ago, she had been dependent on a millionaire ex-husband who viewed her as deadweight. Now she was financially independent, professionally successful, and emotionally free in ways she had never imagined possible. "Mommy, look." Michael held up his magnetic tile creation, a tall tower with multiple levels and architectural details that impressed Victoria with its complexity. "That is incredible, Michael. You are such a good builder. I am going to build houses when I grow up. Big ones, like ours." Victoria's heart warmed. Both children were thriving in ways that had nothing to do with their father's wealth and everything to do with feeling genuinely loved and valued. They had their challenges. Emma sometimes asked why other kids had daddies who lived with them, and Michael occasionally had nightmares that required extra comfort. But overall, they were happy, secure children being raised by a mother who modeled strength instead of victimhood. The coffee shop door chimed, and Victoria glanced up out of habit. A familiar figure entered, looking older and more tired than Victoria remembered. Sarah. Their eyes met across the crowded cafe. Sarah looked genuinely shocked to see Victoria, her face cycling through surprise, guilt, and what might have been hope. Victoria felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no curiosity about Sarah's life since their friendship had exploded in betrayal. Just a mild interest in how this encounter would unfold. Sarah approached their table hesitantly. "Victoria, I cannot believe running into you here." "Hello, Sarah." Emma looked up from her coloring, studying this stranger with the frankness of a child who sensed adult tension. "Oh my God, is this Emma? She is so big now. And this must be Michael." Sarah's voice carried the same bubbly tone Victoria remembered, but it sounded forced now, brittle. "Emma, Michael, this is Sarah. We used to be friends." Sarah flinched at the past tense. "Victoria, could we, could I talk to you for a minute? Privately." Victoria looked at her children, both absorbed in their activities, then back at Sarah. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of them. They know age-appropriate versions of our history." Sarah glanced around the busy coffee shop, clearly uncomfortable with the public setting. "I heard about your book and the TV appearances. I am really proud of you." The comment struck Victoria as absurd. "Proud of me? You look amazing, happy, successful. I always knew you were stronger than you realized." Victoria almost laughed at the revisionist history. "Sarah, you spent 8 months telling Richard I was too weak and dependent to survive on my own. You actively undermined my confidence while stealing my husband. What exactly makes you proud?" Sarah's face crumpled slightly. "I know how this looks. I know what I did was wrong. But Victoria, I was in love. I thought Richard and I had something real. You had something real with me. 20 years of real friendship. You threw that away for an affair with a married man. I realize that now. Richard and I, it did not work out. We were never actually compatible. We just thought we were because the secrecy made everything feel more intense." Victoria sipped her latte, studying Sarah's face. The polished confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine regret. But Victoria felt no satisfaction in Sarah's obvious unhappiness. "I am sorry to hear that did not work out for you. Are you really—" Victoria considered the question seriously. "I am sorry that you learned to build your happiness by destroying other people's. I am sorry that you confused excitement with love and manipulation with friendship. But Sarah, I am not sorry that your affair with my husband ended badly. That was always going to happen." "How did you know?" "Because relationships built on betrayal cannot survive honesty. You and Richard bonded over lying to me, over feeling superior to me, over planning my destruction. When you no longer had me to betray together, what did you have left?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I miss you, Victoria. I miss our friendship. You destroyed our friendship. You cannot miss something you chose to eliminate. Could we? Could we try to rebuild it? I know it would take time." But Victoria looked at her children, at the life she had built, at the woman she had become. "Sarah, I hope you find what you are looking for. I hope you learn to build your own happiness instead of trying to steal someone else's. But our friendship is not something that can be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too complete." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I understand. But Victoria, if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to talk, I will not." They looked at each other across the small table. These two women who had once shared everything, now complete strangers. Victoria felt no anger, no lingering hurt, just a quiet certainty that this chapter of her life was permanently closed. "Goodbye, Sarah." "Goodbye, Victoria." After Sarah left, Emma looked up from her coloring. "Mommy, why was that lady sad? Sometimes people make choices that hurt other people, and then they feel sad about the consequences. But Emma, that is not our responsibility to fix. Are you sad?" Victoria looked around the coffee shop, at her successful children, at the laptop where she had been writing her second book, at the life she had built from the ashes of betrayal. "No, sweetheart, I am not sad at all." They finished their drinks and gathered their things. As they walked home through Central Park, Victoria reflected on how completely her world had transformed. The scared, dependent woman who had discovered Richard's phone was gone, replaced by someone Victoria was proud to be. "Higher, Mommy." Emma called from the playground swing where Victoria was pushing her while Michael climbed on nearby equipment. "As high as you want to go, sweetheart." There are no limits. Victoria's words carried more weight than Emma could understand. This was the lesson Victoria wanted both her children to learn, that they deserved love that lifted them up instead of holding them back. Relationships that celebrated their strength instead of exploiting their vulnerabilities. Lives built on their own terms instead of other people's limitations. That evening, after the children were asleep, Victoria stood on her apartment balcony looking out at the city lights. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from women who had read her book and needed support, 3 interview requests from podcasts, and an email from her publisher asking about her next project. She was no longer the woman who spilled coffee while juggling a toddler and pregnancy exhaustion. She was no longer someone who accepted less than she deserved, who made excuses for people who hurt her, who confused financial security with emotional safety. Victoria thought about women across the country who were living her old life, married to millionaire ex-husbands in the making, surrounded by friends who might not be what they seemed, accepting narcissistic abuse as the price of security. She thought about the phone calls she would return tomorrow, the support group meetings she would lead, the book she would finish writing. Her story had ended not with revenge, but with renewal. Not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Not with dependence, but with the kind of financial independence and emotional strength that no one could take away. The baby monitor crackled as Michael stirred in his sleep. Victoria checked on both children, finding them peaceful and secure in the home they had built together. Emma clutched a stuffed animal Victoria had bought her for being brave during the divorce. Michael slept with his arms spread wide, taking up as much space as his small body could claim. Victoria returned to her laptop and typed the final words of her second book. The woman I was before betrayal would not recognize the woman I became after it. That scared, grateful, accommodating person is gone forever, replaced by someone who knows the difference between being loved and being managed, between authentic friendship and skilled manipulation, between building a life and accepting whatever someone else decides to give you. To the women reading this who are living my old story, you are already stronger than you know. The courage you need is already inside you. The life you deserve is already waiting for you to claim it. Your betrayal is not the end of your story. It is your invitation to write a better one. Victoria saved the document and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to use her experience in service of other women's healing. Tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in a home filled with genuine love, surrounded by people who valued her completely, living a life that no one could diminish or destroy. The transformation that had begun with a forgotten phone was complete. Victoria Hartwell was no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by what she had chosen to build from the wreckage. And what she had built was extraordinary.